I think we'll begin. Well, anyway, thank you for joining us today for the second episode of the Restaurant Dealmaker Show. I'm Steve Zimmerman, the founder and CEO of Restaurant Realty Company, who is sponsoring the show today. I thought I'd begin by giving a little background on myself and then of Patrick, my co-host, who's one of our top agents. I've been in the restaurant business for 20 years. I started working in a family business when I was 16 as a dishwasher. And I worked, part-time through high school cooking. Then I had a stint in the Air Force where I was a mess sergeant, actually cooking in an airman dining room for about 2 years, where we fed about 400 to 500 airmen daily. So after that, I obtained 2 college degrees, and then I started working in the family business, which is Zim's Restaurants in San Francisco. I started as a manager trainee, working full-time, then became an assistant manager and a manager. Then I worked my way up the ranks from being an opening manager of several new restaurants to becoming a district manager, where I oversaw about half a dozen restaurants, and then vice president, president, and CEO. I was basically responsible for management recruitment, finding new locations, negotiating leases, research and development of menu items, labor negotiations with the union, and that actually which led to the demise of our business. My father unfortunately joined the union when he opened his first restaurant, but I won't go into that other than tell you that it was the demise of our business. So after 45 years, our company went out of business due to a conflict with the union, and I started Restaurant Realty Company in 1996, 26 years ago. Since then, we have brokered over 1,400 restaurant, bar, club, or related commercial building sales, leasing over 2.8 million square feet of commercial space and completing over 4,500 restaurant valuations. In the next approximate 30 days, we will have closed escrow on our 200th transaction in over 100 cities since COVID began in March 2020. So we've been busy and established a nice niche for ourselves. At this point, I want to just give you a little brief summary of Patrick Totah's history with Restaurant Realty, and then he will give some introductory remarks himself. But anyway, Patrick has a long career in the food service business. In high school, he worked in family-run delicatessens, and he was a manager, training store specialist, and an area manager for Starbucks and Jamba Juice. He owned 2 successful restaurants, cafes in San Francisco for 10 years, and he's passionate about good food and has a great appreciation for what it takes to run a successful restaurant, and is dedicated to supporting all players in the restaurant industry. So with that being said, Patrick, the floor is yours. And also, please let them know how we met.
Thanks, Steve. Hi, everyone. So I grew up here in the Bay Area and grew up in a delicatessen in San Francisco, and ultimately went and worked for my uncle through high school at Stanford Deli. After getting a little older, I thought I'd get a real job, and I started to get into the whole .com era. And after that blew up, I came back to what I knew, which was food and restaurant business. So I got a job at Starbucks, became a general manager, became a training store manager, and then I began to open stores for them, and I opened 3 stores, including one at Stanford Mall, which actually was the exact same location where my uncle's deli was at Stanford Mall. It was very serendipitous. I then went on to work at Jamba Juice as an area manager, oversaw 12 stores and their managers before coming back to the restaurant industry. And this is where I meet Steve Zimmerman. I bought a restaurant at 4 Embarcadero. The name was Breaking Bread. And I did that transaction with Steve Zimmerman. Basically, we were going through the transaction, and at some point, the price was a little too high for me, so I decided that I had to give Steve a price that we were willing to pay. And Steve said, well, that's way too low, so I don't think that's going to happen. So I said, okay, then I think I'm going to have to walk away from the deal. And I think it was a whole week before I heard back from Steve Zimmerman, and it was the longest week of my life. I felt like I had walked away from the place that I really wanted to buy. And sure enough, about a week later, I get a call from Steve, and he said the seller is willing to accept your offer. And here I am, 10 years later, and I sold Breaking Bread now, and that's how I met Steve.
Yes, and thank God we had the opportunity to meet each other, because Patrick has been a real asset to our team, and we really enjoyed having you as part of our team. Today, we have Patrick has prepared 6 meaningful questions. I think that all of you will have an interest in, pertinent to buyers and sellers and the restaurant industry in general. And so we will go through the questions, and we encourage you to ask questions. You have a question queue on the bottom of your screen. So please, if you have a question at any time, just enter it into the question box, and we will respond to the questions. If we get to a point where we run out of time and we don't have enough time to respond to all the questions, we will respond to you after this event. So you can be assured that either Patrick or myself will get back to you if we don't have the opportunity to respond to your question today. So with all that being said, I think we'll get into the first subject, and that is, what is the advantage of working with Restaurant Realty Company and our agents versus other companies? And I think I'll let Patrick take that one first. So Patrick, please.
Sure, thank you. So I think since I totally understand what restaurant owners and buyers are going through in the midst of a transaction, since I was both a buyer and a seller before joining Restaurant Realty, I feel like my role is to explain what to expect during a transaction, but also to help manage the emotions, as I believe that the process can be a little stressful. I also feel like we offer full service. We do help with the ABC process. We help with obtaining permits, or closing all the different government agency accounts. And we're there holding both the buyer and seller's hand throughout the entire transaction. I think that's what sets us apart from other agents.
Thank you, Patrick. Just to amplify on Patrick's response a little bit, most of our agents and brokers have either been restaurant owners like Patrick, or they've been restaurant managers. So they understand the business from the inside out, which is extremely important in being able to relate to the owner, and also to customers and buyers and everybody that's associated with the business, vendors. We have empathy in dealing with the trials and tribulations, in particular with the restaurant owner, because it's extremely challenging dealing with all the issues and running the restaurant business. Restaurants are sort of like a factory. You get the raw product, the food, you accept it, you prepare it, you serve it, and it's a whole process where a lot of problems could go wrong in the interim. And again, one of the things that sets us apart is we only specialize in restaurants, bars, clubs, and other food service businesses and related commercial buildings, which means related commercial buildings means in order to sell a building, it has to have a restaurant, bar, club, or other food service facility attached to it. We're true to our niche. We don't deviate. We don't sell apartment buildings, again, unless there's an apartment building with a restaurant, which in some cases that has occurred. So we only focus on this area, and which, again, because we've done so many transactions, we're specialists in this arena. And again, from my perspective, not only have I been a restaurant owner, I'm also a restaurant landlord. So I have empathy for obviously for the tenant, having been a restaurant tenant when we had restaurants, and from the restaurant landlord's perspective, it gives me a little bit more reality in dealing with and being fair with, restaurant tenants, understanding, again, the trials and tribulations they need to go through. So again, it's very advantageous, working with people that you yourself have been in their shoes. Okay. Okay, let's see. I see a few questions already. Okay. Uh, do you work with clients in commercial leasing realty capacity also, as opposed to negotiate an actual purchase sale of a restaurant itself? You want to respond to that one?
Sure, yeah, we work with, we do leasing when it's with a restaurant, bar, or a nightclub. I recently did a deal downtown for a restaurant on a lease. So yeah, as long as there's a restaurant involved, we will do that deal.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we do. Right now, we're working on several just commercial leases. Again, related to restaurants, of course. Thank you, Tony, for that question. Another question from Ficus: what is the way to make an Indian restaurant profitable, or restaurants in general? Is it a QSR concept like a fast food, production floor kind of environment, an in and out, or fine dining? That's a comprehensive question. Thank you, Ficus. Do you want to take a stab at that one?
I mean, I think there's many different ways to make a restaurant profitable. I don't know if it being Indian or any ethnic food. I think it's really about your prime costs. Making sure your labor and your cost of goods are at 50%, no more than 55%. I know that's really hard these days, but I think if you can have your prime cost in check, and if you can have your rent not exceed the 8 to 10% mark, I think you're going to be set up for more success.
Yeah, I think that's important. Obviously doing a pro forma projection as to what your income and expenses are going to be, and you need to be conservative in your projections because things do go wrong. Needless to say, the pandemic is a good example of that, which is rather an extreme one, but inevitably, things don't always turn out as they should be. Here's another question from Vicus. Also, what is the most cost-effective POS system to employ, and what are your thoughts on Toast versus others? Unfortunately, since I've been out of the operations arena for 25 years, I'm not really prepared to answer that. I don't know. Do you have a feeling for that? You've been in operations more recently than I have, Patrick.
Sure, yeah. As I was selling my restaurants, a lot of these new POSs were coming out. So I don't have a ton of experience with them myself. However, when I go into pretty good operated restaurants, I would say most of the people right now are using Toast. It seems like most of the feedback that I get, I hear really good things about the Toast operating system.
Yeah, I have as well. All right, thank you. And there's one more question from Vicus. What are the key things to watch for in a new restaurant lease? Well, that's a good one.
Yeah.
You want to take a stab, or you want me to do that first?
Yeah, I'll just say something really quickly. I think that one of the bigger clauses that I see a lot in leases that you want to be careful about in the Bay Area is the consideration clause. Landlords will try and sneak in a clause where if you later on want to sell your business and you want to sign the lease over, that they will get a percentage of the key money. So I would say to really look out for that clause. Sometimes it's like 25% or 50% upon the sale of your business. And I think that's a really big one to watch out for.
Yeah. The other big thing to watch out for, again, in the assignment or sublease clause is recapture provision, which means that if you ask the landlord, you have a prospective buyer and you want to either assign the lease or get a new lease, the landlord has the right to basically take back the premises, which is obviously devastating to you as the operator. If you don't have the premises, you have no business. So you got to really be cognizant about these recapture clauses and these participation, the information that Patrick just mentioned, where they get a percent of the proceeds of the sale. And needless to say, you need to have a good rent, and minimal, yearly increases. You usually want a 5-year lease with the 5-year or multiple 5-year options. And the big thing with options is the rent in most cases is fair market rent, which means if, inflation is going crazy, your rent could, increase by, 25%, 30%. And that kind of tremendous increase could be the difference between making money and losing money. So you want to have some parameters in place for what is the determinant of the rent at the beginning of each option period. Either a flat amount, maybe a 10% increase, at the end of the first 5-year period, and then with normal, 2-3% a year increases. The fair market rent can basically, put you out of business. So you got to have some controls there. And if you want more information on that, just contact me or Patrick. Will be able to give you a lot more information on that. The next question we want to tackle is, what is the most challenging part of getting a deal done? You want to start, Patrick?
Sure. Yeah. I think in the beginning, when I started with you, you told me that every deal is completely different, and that has been very true. And another mentor, Ron Johnson, told me that a deal will die 3 times before it happens. And that's been very helpful for me in the middle of a deal, because it really does. It really happens all the time. So I think having an expectation set that there are challenges makes it less. You get less freaked out when it happens. I think one of the biggest challenges in getting a deal done is always the landlord. You have to remember the landlord is a third party to the deal. It's not like selling a house where it's just a buyer and a seller and that's it. You have to get the landlord on board with the deal. And sometimes there's really nothing in it for the landlord. So, I think if I look back at all my deals that didn't happen, it's about 95% because, the landlord killed the deal. I think one of the most important things you can do as a seller is to cultivate a really strong relationship with your landlord, because you're going to need them on board with you if you plan on having an exit strategy and you want to sell. So it's something that you want to, work on and have good rapport with your landlord.
Yeah. In addition to that, in the Bay Area in particular, a big challenge when we do a sale of a restaurant, most of the Bay Area counties dealing with the health department. And the health department requires, in most counties in the Bay Area, change of ownership health department inspection, which means that the seller has to bring the premises up to today's current standard. So if he has a 20 or 30-year-old restaurant, he probably doesn't have the proper upgrades, mop sinks, floor sinks, hand sinks, smooth washable surfaces, floors, walls, and ceilings, the proper air control and the duct system, on and on. And so what happens is during the contingency period, or if not sooner, we have a change of ownership inspection done. The health department generates a large list or some list, and then it's the responsibility of the seller to get those items taken care of, because in order for the buyer to get his business license, he has to have a sign off by the health department that all these change of ownership health department inspection new requirements have been completed. So that sometimes can be a big issue. I know in our Southern California transactions, the change of ownership is not a big issue as it is in Northern California. Then another one of the most challenging parts of getting a deal done in a lot of cases is just getting clarity, from the buyer up front that he is qualified financially and operationally, and that he performs on a timely basis. And because, you've heard the expression, time kills deals. And so it's imperative that, we make sure that the buyer is qualified, he puts his deposits up on a timely basis and gets the lease documents executed, et cetera. So we've got another question here. Let's see, from Tony. If the option is at fair market, is there any chance it would go down? Okay, that's a question. Go ahead.
Typically, a landlord will put not to be less than previous year. So right. I've rarely seen fair market go down, because there's usually language that keeps that from happening. Now, yes. You can put a cap on how much it can go up. You can say not to exceed, 5%, whatever fair market value, but not to exceed 5% or something like that.
Right. Let's see. Next question. Can you speak about your experience with restaurant franchises? I'll take a crack on that one first. We've sold a number of resale franchises. Each franchise has their own little nuances as far as getting approved by the franchisor. Some required you to go to training schools. Training school, it's put on by the franchisor and usually in a different part of the country. Well, like for example, we just sold a Dairy Queen. The buyer had to, before he could even get approved by the franchisee, had to go through training classes for a week or two. Had to take an exam, had to meet the criteria before we could even, complete the transaction. Because, and then, they have to pay a transfer fee. And of course, the royalty fees of the franchise. So every franchise has their own little nuances, but there are added steps to get approval by the franchisor. Anything you want to add on that, Patrick?
Yeah, the other thing that I would add is I've noticed that the franchisor will do a walkthrough before you close, and they may ask the current franchisee to replace certain items in their restaurant, like the tables and chairs, because they want to do a refresh and have that place look good. So that's one extra step that you would normally not have, that the franchisor will make you do at the last second.
Right. Yeah, no, that's definitely the franchisor requires a refresh, or even more than just a refresh, an upgrade. They want a total remodel every number of years, so it maintains the look and feel of the franchise system. So that's something to definitely build into your reserves, that you're going to have to spend X amount of dollars, and then they'll tell you approximately what amount of dollars you're going to need to stash away to do these upgrades periodically. All right, next question we'd like to handle is, what are the attributes of a seller or buyer that you look for as a broker? Go ahead, Patrick.
Okay.
You want me to handle this one first?
No, I got it. Yeah.
Okay.
I think the most important thing for me is everybody having patience, both the buyer and seller. Buyer needs to be patient. The seller needs to be patient. For first-time buyers and sellers, sometimes the expectation is that the transaction should happen really quickly. So it's really important when I'm working with buyers and sellers that they're willing to learn about what goes into the process. And rather than expecting that something really complex is going to happen overnight, that it does take time. I think my experience is that when everybody's trying to rush through a deal, it usually ends up taking longer. It's like Murphy's Law or something. So I think my favorite attribute for both is just everybody having patience, and there's less stress and less pressure. And, usually things happen a little easier.
Got it. Thank you. From my perspective, I break it down two ways: the seller and what attributes I'm looking for in a seller and a buyer. For a seller, obviously, I'm concerned about them having good books and records. I want the physical premises to be well maintained, so the place shows well. It's important that they have a good relationship with the landlord. Although, however, if they have a bad relationship with the landlord, that sometimes can be to your advantage, because the landlord wants to get rid of them. So they may be more motivated to offer incentives to a new qualified buyer tenant to get the old tenant out, because the old tenant's been a pain in the butt to the landlord. I've seen that happen on numerous times. So one extreme to the other. If you're a nice guy, then you may have to go through added hoops with the landlord. If you're a bad guy, that may help grease the tracks to get the new buyer in. But on the buyer side, obviously it's important that the buyer is financially and operationally qualified. I'd like to see proof of source of funds. You want to see where the beef is. We want to see people being able to walk their talk. Very important. And we want a buyer to respond on a timely basis. Those are sort of the general attributes that I look for in a seller and a buyer. Going back to the questions here, and we appreciate your questions, so please have them come through. This is from Matthew. On the health department inspection, does that include ADA requirements for a seller to correct? I'll take a stab on that one first, and then Patrick can add. ADA is a different arena. Health department doesn't usually not get involved with ADA. And you can hire a CASP, certified, what does CASP stand for? Certified Accessibility Specialist, okay? These are licensed inspectors by the state. It costs about $500 or $600 to get an inspection, but it's worth the insurance if you think that the place is not up to ADA standards. The big ADA issues is obviously the ramp. If there's a ramp to get in the front door, if there's a slope, the ramp has to be certain degrees, very minimal. The door has to be wide enough to accommodate a wheelchair. There needs to be an ADA restroom that's accessible for a wheelchair, and the wheelchair is not going to conflict with the height of the sink. There's got to be grab bars, et cetera. So there's a set of requirements. Some cases you have to have a special designated table for ADA. You need to have, sometimes if there's a bar, you may have to have a depressed section of the bar so a wheelchair can wheel up to the bar and not be a second-class citizen because you can't reach a standard height bar. So yes, hire a CASP inspector, have the inspection done so you know exactly what you're getting into, because there's been a lot of lawsuits that have occurred where handicapped people have tried to get access, they couldn't, and there have been some big fines that have been levied against operators for not complying. So that's paramount, and that's separate and distinct from the health department altogether. Let's see, we have another question from, franchises. Oh, Keith Simpson, our top agent. Does a prospective franchise buyer need to have previous restaurant experience to obtain an SBA loan? Good question. Who wants to take a stab at that?
I can't stress enough how much experience matters in getting a deal done. And the SBA, you could have all the money in the world and really strong financials, but they are going to want you to have restaurant experience, recent and relative restaurant experience, very important.
Yes. Yeah, that is for sure. I don't really have much to add on that. I would imagine, again, I can't remember, let's see, this Dairy Queen deal we did, that there was an SBA loan, the agent that handled that. I don't remember, I was not the agent, so I don't remember what the buyer's background was, whether it was a previous Dairy Queen franchisee or he had restaurant experience at all. I'm not sure if it's a deal breaker per se in a franchise situation if you don't have restaurant experience, because there's an added a chance that the restaurant owner is going to be successful as a franchisee if it's a successful franchise versus an independent. The failure rate for independents are generally 80% within the first 5 years. It's the converse for a franchise. Franchises have a failure rate of maybe 20%. A bona fide credited franchise that's been around for many years. So my gut is that you don't need to have experience necessarily to get an SBA loan for a franchise, because they're banking on the fact that you're going to get trained by that franchisor. You're going to learn their systems, their standard operating procedures. And if you follow their guidelines, and you're only going to be an operator if you do follow their guidelines, you're going to be successful. So I don't think it is a requirement for SBA. And if there's a lender listening, please, and you don't appreciate my response, please let me know. In other words, but I think I gave the right response. Okay, next question. Why is it important to go through escrow when buying a business? And what is the bulk sale publication process all about? Patrick?
Yeah, sure. There are so many reasons to go through escrow and the bulk sale publication, but I think the most important one is for liability. So I'm going to talk, I guess, specifically about a deal I did in the beginning of my career here at Restaurant Realty. This seller purchased 2 stores outside of escrow, ran them for a couple of years, then decided to sell. And he bought those 2 stores from, the seller at that time outside of escrow. Now, when we went into escrow at the time, when we were selling these 2 stores, what happened was all these claims came up on his business from financial institutions, from the state of California for sales tax owed from the previous seller. And because he didn't have, had gone through the escrow process, he was liable for these. Now, the sales tax, we were able to get cleared because they were able to find the previous seller. The two financial institutions, we had to do a settlement, and basically my client had to pay someone else's, financial institutions to get the UCC1 claim released. So in order for us to close escrow. I can't stress enough how important going through escrow and doing the bulk sale process is, as I've seen it really affect some of my clients. Yeah.
You want to explain, Patrick, what a UCC1 is?
Yeah, the UCC1 is, let's say you take out a loan like a EIDL loan. I know a lot of restaurant owners are taking out those right now. What will happen is SBA will put a UCC1 on all assets of the business. So basically your equipment is encumbered until you get that removed. And when you go through escrow and you do the bulk sale, what they do is they do a search. And so any claims at that location, whether you're the, whether it's under you or the previous owner, will always be on that location until they're formally removed.
Right. So it's a lien against the business, like a note, like a deed of trust is liened against a piece of real estate. A UCC1 is a lien against a business, and you can't get title free and clear the business until the lien is removed. The other thing to amplify a little bit on the bulk sale, in California, there's a state law that it's called tax successorship liability. And unless you do an escrow, the buyer is going to be liable for the sales tax, the franchise tax board tax, and EDD, Employment Development Department payroll tax of the seller. So needless to say, when a buyer buys a business, he wants to get title free and clear. And by going through an escrow and doing bulk sale, you can be assured that you are going to get tax clearances from those successorship tax agencies. In addition to get title free and clear from any liens and encumbrances that are recorded against the property. So it's imperative that you use an escrow so you get title free and clear. And again, the escrow company also is a fiduciary for handling the funds. So you don't want the funds going to some other party other than a neutral party, and who is entitled, is instructed to disperse the funds accordingly. So that's another important part of escrow, to have a fiduciary for dispersing funds, et cetera. And so we strongly recommend it. Looking at the questions here, I see one from Dan. What is the simple formula for establishing the goodwill value of a business? I'll take a crack on that one first. Usually we have two basic methods for valuing a business. One is called assets in place, which means that the business is not making money, it's marginally profitable, or we may be selling a business that is profitable. It may be part of a chain, and the chain doesn't want to continue this operation because it's not performing at its normal performance level. And so none of the proprietary items are going to be included. You don't have the name, you don't have the menu, you don't have any of the IT, et cetera. You're just buying the assets in place. So that falls in the assets category, those three definitions. And then we have the going concern, where somebody's buying an existing successful business. So the name, the menu, the IT, all the proprietary items are included. So as far as goodwill, factoring out a specific value for goodwill, the goodwill is embedded into the ongoing success operation. The cash flow, the customer base, the reputation of the business, those items constitute goodwill, and they're reflected in the overall performance of the business. We don't itemize goodwill per se. It's built into the success of the ongoing operation. You want to add anything to that?
I think that pretty much covers it.
Okay. All right. We have another question here from Robert Porter. Oh, one of our key lenders. Robert is Vice President of Lending for Plumas Bank, which is a community bank. And we've done a multitude of deals with them over the years. And we've had a great working partnership together. And I strongly recommend using Plumas Bank. They've been just terrific to deal with. And Bob is saying much more flexible with direct industry experience when it is a franchise due to the extensive vesting and training offered by the franchisor. Thank you, Bob, for getting my head on straight, keeping it straight in that regard. So what Bob is basically saying, he's reinforcing what I previously had thought, that you don't have to have restaurant experience if you're buying to get an SBA loan and you're buying a well-established franchise. So thank you for that comment. Appreciate that. Let's see. Okay. Another question from Vicus. Vicus, you're a great audience listener. We appreciate your participation. Will SBA willing to see the operator as the restaurant manager has 20 years of experience, who is part of the partnership structure?
Yes.
As operating partner? Go ahead. You want to tackle this question? You see it, right?
Yeah. So I think what you're asking is if you have a partnership and you have one of the partners who has restaurant experience, and if the SBA would be willing to use that person as experience, and I think that's correct. They would. So you can have a money person and you can have an operator person, and I think that would make a really good partnership. Absolutely.
Yeah, got it. I concur. Okay, our next question. Why is confidential listing so important? If you look at our listings, you'll see that most of them are confidential listings. They're ongoing businesses. Obviously, the seller is very concerned about keeping his employees in line, especially in this day and age where it's hard to get employees because of the pandemic. And also very concerned about, customers, vendors, finding out that, this place is for sale. Maybe there's going to be some slacking in the standards of how the business is operated, and the food's not going to be as good. The service is not going to be as good. So, those are some of the reasons, but, most importantly, you want to keep the continuity of the business going, because the buyers, if he's buying the going concern in particular, the employees are a major asset of the business. We don't want the employees to all of a sudden get nervous, not knowing what the new owner is going to be like, and start looking for another job, and therefore, so it's got to be done on an orderly basis. So at the right time, when all the contingencies are removed, the seller will bring the buyer into the restaurant before we close escrow, introduce the buyer. The buyer will, present himself in such a way that he will encourage the employees to stay. In a lot of cases, the buyer may be a breath of fresh air for the employees, because he's bringing in all these new ideas. In a lot of cases, he's younger, he's got a lot more energy, he wants to, take the business to a different level. For example, I sold this breakfast and lunch operation, been in business, same owners, 35 years. A lot of employees there, 20, 25-year employees. Obviously, the buyer was fairly young, early 30s, but he had experience. He had an existing restaurant. He knew how to effectively deal with people, but he was young, had a lot of energy, and we presented it in such a way that it became a very positive experience for the employees. And there was no washout. Everyone stuck around, and he just basically maintained the business, made some tweaks and improved it, somewhat. And it's been a win-win situation for the owner and the employees. You want to add anything, Patrick, on that?
Yeah, I mean, I would just add or echo what you had to say. I mean, really with your team, which is the most important part. I think with my experience in both selling and buying restaurants for myself is, once the team finds out that it's for sale, I mean, it's a little uneasy, but as long as they understand that their job isn't changing, their pay is staying the same, they meet the buyer, a lot of that uneasiness kind of goes away. And I think you'll find that they'll respond they'll respond nicely to that. So I just wanted to echo that.
All right, thank you. We have another question here from Ashish. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. Can you double click on restaurant experience? What are some of the most important skills for someone who is new to the restaurant industry? Okay. how do you interpret that question, Patrick? Let's see. He wants to know what the requirements are of an operator to have enough restaurant experience, what the basic
Yeah, I mean,
requirements are.
there's so many different things. I mean, it's there's a good team. I say is someone who's going to be the financial person, and then the other person who's going to be the operator. Operator is someone that who's going to be really fantastic in front of customers. That they're going to be able to get their team, working to provide excellent customer service. They know how to manage their staff. They know how to manage their cost of goods. But really, you probably need two people, one person who's dealing with the financials and another person who's the operator. I think that's always a good tandem.
Yeah. And I think one of the key ingredients to be a successful restaurant owner manager is you have to like people. Obviously, you're not going to, be in love with every employee that you have. But the reality is you're the role model. You set the pace. You're the motivator. And it's important, I think, to have a good working knowledge of all the basic skill sets of the restaurant, front of the house, back of the house. You don't have to be a chef per se, but you have to understand the mechanics of how the kitchen works and the proper plate procedures and portion control, et cetera. So you have to have a good working knowledge of all the basic crafts, because in a smaller operation, especially with how difficult it is to get employees today, it wouldn't be unheard of you to have to jump behind the bar and make drinks, or work the front of the house, seating people, maybe taking orders, maybe even jumping in the kitchen, helping the kitchen get the food out if necessary. So having experience in the basic skills levels of all the different facets of the operation is very helpful. And again, as Patrick mentioned, you need a good, you need someone to oversee the financial end of the business, the marketing side of the business, and obviously you as the owner manager oversee the operations, the day-to-day hiring, firing, scheduling, banking, et cetera. So it's very comprehensive, to say the least. Next question. How do you deal with a seller that thinks his business is worth more than it is? Good question. I'm going to let Patrick take a stab at that one. Let's see what the question.
Let's see here.
Patrick wrote all these questions, by the way.
Questions that were given to me by other people, yes. A lot of time the sellers have unrealistic ideas about what their business is worth. And I can completely understand having, worked my butt off in the restaurant industry. And, when you work hard and you put so much into your business, you want to get paid at the end of it all. While this is completely understandable, we have a pretty systematic process of valuing businesses. And I find that if you inflate prices, the listing will just sit on the market, and you really need to stick to the system of, what either doing the two value methods that Steve spoke about earlier. My job is to sell the restaurant. Obviously I want to get as much as possible for the seller, but you have to balance that with the market trends.
Yeah. So what I generally do is, when I do a valuation for someone, it's based upon sales comps, and we use our own sales comps because we've done over 1,400 transactions. So there's nothing like, what's been the history of sales in a particular, and they're generally similar from region to different parts of the state. And if you have somebody that's a seller that's just really unreasonable, in more cases than not, I usually pass on the listing, because I'd be doing him a disservice to take an overpriced listing, having to sit there for a period of time, and which is frustrating to him, frustrating to us, for the time and effort that we put in packaging it and marketing it, et cetera. So we're not adverse to taking a listing that may be slightly overpriced, because we understand there's going to be some negotiations going on. But usually if someone is really adamant that, they want to price it higher than the market, somewhat higher again is okay. But what I tell them very specifically is that, after we've been out on the market for 60, 90 days, and we count the number of NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, because nobody's going to find out about a particular listing until they sign an NDA. If we have, after 90 days, we have like, 5 or 6 NDAs, and normally we should be good listings should be generating 10 or more NDAs a month. So we have, maybe 1/3 or less of the number of NDAs we have. It basically is basically a sign to the seller that, hey, you're not getting a lot of response here. You're not getting a lot of response because they're looking at the profile and they're seeing the sales, they're seeing the cash flow, and they look at the sales price relative to the cash flow and sales, and it doesn't make sense. And so therefore they're not even, interested in finding out any more, and they won't make any inquiry and won't fill out an NDA. So that's one of the warning signs, so to speak, as to the lack of response on overpriced listing. So let's see. As I said, we may decide to pass on the listing, and if it's grossly overpriced. But again, if it's very unique, if there's real estate with it, we find generally, because there aren't a lot of restaurant owners that own the business and own the real estate. But we have found historically that buyers can pay up to 10% premium on the value of the business if they can buy the real estate with it, because of supply and demand. And most of the buildings I've sold, been fairly aggressively priced. I mean, the real estate's been priced based upon what the sales comps have been. But on the business end, we have found traditionally we've been able to get somewhere upwards of sometimes a premium of 10% or more for the value of the business, because again, the buyer of the business wants to be his own landlord, not be the whims of the landlord. So that's been very helpful. Let's see, another question. Okay. We talked, okay, I think we've answered most of the questions. Yeah, I think we've seen that one. All right, I'll throw another question out. How do you value a business that has been greatly negatively impacted during COVID and was closed for part of the time and or had limited hours during the remainder of COVID? You want to take a shot at that one, Patrick?
Sure. So, I mean, right now is an interesting time when we're doing valuations, and each one is going to be completely different. And I think it's really important to look at pre-COVID. And so I'm looking at 2018, 2019, and then I'll look at 20 and 21 now that we have a full year. And if 21 is closer to 18 and 19, then it's really simple. I'd most likely look at 18, 19, and 21 when doing a valuation. If 21 still hasn't recovered to 90+%, then I feel like there's you really have to take into consideration where the business is now, and that's probably using 19, 20, and 21 and doing a valuation, which unfortunately will come in a little lower. So it's just really about how much the business has recovered from the pandemic. Right.
Yeah, I agree. In most cases, I'm just totally throwing out 2020, unless it's it was a business modeled for takeout and delivery primarily, or a drive-through takeout operation, in which case those have done really well. So 20 would be relative in those cases. But we saw a lot of pizza places that they were able to maintain their sales and profits during COVID because of the higher demand for that product, takeout and delivery, et cetera. But we definitely do make adjustments for COVID for sure. Here's another question from Jose. I'm ready to retire after 25 years in the restaurant business. It is a profitable business with great rent. It has been, our best year was in 2019 and the worst year, 2000, and a good year in 2021. I'm thinking the best way to sell my restaurant is have a buyer get an SBA loan so the down payment is low and gives the buyer better cash flow, not paying in full at purchase. What are the profit percent the SBA looks to from the business in net sales? Okay. You want to take a stab at that, or would you like me to?
I'll let you go ahead.
Okay, fine. Well, the SBA has a formula. It's cash flow to debt ratio, and they usually want to see, cash flow in excess of 1.25% of what the debt amount's going to be. So they want you to have at least 25% more cash flow after paying the debt. So it's a debt to loan ratio that they have. And so what they do is they look at the net income on the tax return, and they will add back depreciation, they'll add back interest expense, amortization, and they'll add back one working owner's compensation. That could be, basically his salary and payroll taxes. And they add that back. They come up with the seller's discretionary earnings. And again, it has to meet that formula requirement, and it's straight formula. So what we typically do is when we obtain a listing, or before we obtain a listing, if we see it's a candidate for SBA, we run it by our SBA lenders before we even get the listing. And so we get the business pre-qualified by SBA, and we market it as such, because obviously if we're selling a $300,000 business and you only need 20% for SBA, there are a lot more people that have 60,000 than 300,000. So we market it as so there are two basic criteria for SBA on the upfront. The business has to be qualified, which we do before we obtain the listing, and we market it as an SBA financeable deal. And then when the buyer comes to the plate, then the buyer has to be pre-qualified by SBA. And again, if it's a non-franchise situation, we're going to require experience in the business, as well as the financial wherewithal. And generally, if you own real estate, they're going to want to collateralize the loan, not only against the business, but against your real estate as well. And that's a normal requirement. Again, but if you're getting an SBA, you're buying the building from an SBA loan on the building and the business, then you'll just collateralize the building that you're buying, not any extra real estate that you own. But SBA is a great source for financing. And banks like it because it's guaranteed by the government. 90% I think is the guarantee rate. So we do a lot of SBA transactions. Let's see. Here's a gentleman, Dan. We own a historic waterfront restaurant in Michigan. We own property, and FF&E will be listing turnkey. What should we look for in a broker that will benefit us the most? Do you want to take a shot at that, or do you want me to?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think most important factor is a broker who has relevant business experience, has sold, restaurants or businesses in the area. And I think that's probably one of the more important things to look for in the area.
Yeah. An experienced restaurant broker like ourselves. Unfortunately, we only do deals in California. Otherwise, we'd love to work with you. Yeah. If, by the way, Dan, if you want a referral for a good restaurant broker in Michigan, please email me, and I'll be happy to get you. I'm a member of the International Business Broker Association, and I've got access to top business brokers throughout this country. So it's steve@restaurantrealty.com for me. For Patrick, if you have any questions, it's patrick@restaurantrealty.com. Let's see, here we have another question. Oops, okay, it's supposed to be 2020. Okay, what is the going rate for a 7A business loan? It's formula. I think it says it. I don't want to quote it because I'm not totally sure, but it's a point or two above prime. The prime rate is the formula. And if you want, again, more specifics, please email and we'll get it for you. Let's see. Here's another question. What is the outlook for the restaurant industry once the pandemic has converted to an endemic? And hopefully we're headed for that endemic stage, God willing. But I'll just take a crack at that one first, and then Patrick can add if he has any further thoughts. First of all, customers are yearning to basically eat out. They're tired of their own cooking. They're tired of inferior takeout and delivery food. They are interested in having different types of foods than their own cooking, and eating out is not only the means of satisfying your hunger, but it's also a form of entertainment. So I think there's a huge pent-up demand for people to go out and experience eating in the restaurant. Patrick, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's absolutely true. And I think we're starting to see signs of that. I mean, if you go out to the coast, there's like local tourism going on, and people are going to, out to the beach and areas. And so those restaurants are already experiencing kind of an uptick in sales. And so I think, what you're saying is absolutely true. People want to get out of the house. They want to go eat, and delivery has its limitations. Although very convenient, the food is, it's not very, very good.
Okay. I want to just chime in to respond to that question about what is the formula for the interest rate for an SBA loan. Our expert, Bob Porter, responded, depends on the deal, investment, collateral, credit, et cetera. But generally, it's the prime rate, which is currently at 3.25%, plus 2 points to 2.75%. Or if you add those two together, the current interest rate would be 5.25% to 6%. And these are generally 10-year amortization loans, which means the loan has to be paid off in full within 10-year period. So that means you're going to have enough time on your lease to amortize the loan. That's imperative. So thank you, Bob, for that response. Let's see, one other question, and then I think we're running out of time. Will the employment market improve for the restaurant industry? For those of you that are operators and are scrambling around playing waitress and cook and all the jobs you don't normally do at this time because you can't find enough employees to fill those positions. You want to take a stab at that one, Patrick?
Yeah, I mean, I think things are going to normalize. Eventually, people are going to, I think there are people who like to be in the restaurant industry, and they love the hustle. They love the people watching that comes with it, and I think inevitably you're going to have people want to come back to the industry. I just hopefully it's sooner rather than later at this point. Yeah.
I think one of the underlying problems for employees is they're fearful of interacting with other employees and customers because of the transmission of the COVID. But I think they're going to become less fearful because of the vaccination and the endemic stage, hopefully. And additionally, a lot of these federal and state subsidies, are phasing out, and so employees need to pay their bills. So they're going to have no choice but to go back and work to pay their bills. So anyway, I'm optimistic. I think the industry is going to come back, and it's going to be thriving, and things will be on the up and up. But I think with that, all that being said, we've run out of time. I want to thank you all for joining us today. We appreciate your questions. Our next get together will be on the, let's see, the date is I believe it's the 24th of March. And Andy Mirabell, who's one of our top agents, will be the co-host with me. So again, if you have further questions, please get in touch with us. It's Steve at restaurantrealty.com or Patrick at restaurantrealty.com. And again, thank you all for your participation. Stay healthy. Have a nice weekend. Thank you. Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you, Steve.